ensonga nga bwe zigenda mu maaso mu ggwanga naddala mu nga tubuzayo ennaku 8 eziri official okubanga Uganda egenda salawo ani anaabeera president w'ensi yattu Uganda gye the power of Africa wamu n'abaka ba parliament saako ne offices endala. Omukuku na Joseph Tamale Mirundi wasizeyo tyano muziki webale kunyuma
abasoma bwe tulabika bubi abaana banaasoma
bw'oyogera bw'oti abaasoma ate abatasoma bw'oti balina kulabika bulungi
ekyo kakati bomba mufaanagana
wateeka okubaawo enjawulo wakati yasoma
n'atasinayo obyali bulungi. There must be a difference between, otherwise people will lose interest.
naye nga bitambula bita side yo.
No, you see for me, mbagamba, if I take my kid to a dentist and hear the kid making noise, I cannot storm the doctor's door because removing the teeth is painful.
Ate nga amaze okusannyalaza.
Mao said, Mao on what deep garbage in,
garbage out.
You reap
what you sow. Kituufu. Bwe tunuulira ensonga bwe zigenda maaso mu ggwanga ennaku zino 8 eziri official bifungo gyeko didde nga 14 January. Uganda yeteeseteese okubanga egenda kulonda ani anaabeera president. Tulina ba presidential candidates bali 11 kuliko omukyalo omu. Era butunulira akalu kano ng'oggyeko okuba nti akali scientific nga electoral commission wamu ne ministry y'ebyobulamu bwe bakalangirira. How different is it from the previous elections?
I was hearing in Uganda this morning as I was coming, saying that the political parties or presidential candidates have a right to announce their results, disputing the role, the supremacy of the Electoral Commission.
Constitutionally, Electoral Commission in a mandate okulangirira akalulu.
Uganda musajja musiraamu ani alangirira omwezi
Mecca.
Director wa Sharia Kampala Mukandi.
Nenga bafuna directive okuva Mecca.
There would be confusion. Olwayinza okujja naga nti why zisina za kusaala yidi kangongezeeyo.
Buli omu yandibadde akikola.
Yes, wina amaaso n'ekiwezi bakulaba and the Muslims bakugattako n'okugattako nti naawe agulabye kukubira essimu not to create a stampede and confusion. Kakati Nganda musajja yasoma.
Nze Tamale awono tugenda tuukawo katono nnyo ku different political parties abazze neyo enkola. Naye njagala tukubire torch ku njawulo eri kaluka na ka 221.
Nti ekibalimu okutegeera. Election is a process.
True.
Is like a pregnancy, is like education. Yonna bwegenda kufulumya ebigezo omwana we abadde tasoma kakati bikukikolebwa kitya abataweerera abaana abatatekayo requirements mu musooka ku ssomero. This is a process. Pregnancy mukazi we tomutwalangako continental clinic tomutwalangako ki ng'ovuma abasawo kakati election is a process. The problem ey'omu Uganda, we don't have politicians.
What do we have?
Opportunists.
Kozesa abantu nga maddaala kufuna bye baagala.
A politician. Wow. There are two types of politicians or political opponents. One is an itching opponent. An itching opponent starts elections the day the earlier one is declared. Atandikirawo okukola.
Akudda ku ground. Okay.
Yero bakalangirira. That is an itching opponent. Raila Odinga tabakiriza kwebaka. We don't have an itching opponent in Uganda.
Ever active.
Tebaliwo. These are assignment politicians who just come as scavengers to reap where they never planted.
Okay.
That's one. Two, what type of political parties do we have? We also have assignment political parties which emerge during elections opportunistically. Nitubeerayo, when you look at NRM, revolutionary political parties zirina ebintu ng'ebyo. One, they don't involve in politicking all the time. That's why bo balabanga lutalo. Whenever you have elections, Museveni goes back to Luwero to launch his war. A revolutionary party does not engage in politicking.
Buli tugera mukalu adde Luwero he launches a war obaddayo kubabuuzaako. Hawone ekintu ky'abantu beebuuza. Sokole katonya. Abantu beebuuza. Nti President Museveni naddala yaddayo Luwero yaddayo nga
anti
yalazeyo kwebaza.
Yagamba this is a war. Revolutionary political parties don't engage in politics all of the time. They consider it as a war. During yebotulaba abeeruweero bajja ne balwana. Bwe baamala okulwana ne bagamba nti abaagala amagye muliwa. Many people who fought on Luwero did not want to join the army. Both they were, you have to be recruited into the army. Tewamu bawandiika nojja. Waliwo eyali embeera eyamuyingiza amagye ye nga tagaagala. Second World War. Many of our fathers went back. The Okeros remained in the army. Bo baali bagaagala. Maybe nokuba recruiting nga baava mu magye. Kakati the Revolutionary Political Party yo kyekola okulonda bwe kuggwa National Task Force bagijjawo negenda ng'etubbye ne ssente zaffe n'edduka leediyo tezisasula naki
ekomawo ng'emyaka 5 giyuseewo
ng'abantu are we going to use ye again?
Secretariat bonna basirika.
Yes.
Okay.
Kakati ate eno active political party yebeerawo
ng'ekola ki?
You can have by-elections. Kyola beenali mbagiwangula mu by-election kubanga after the elections edismantling ebintu byayo byonna negenda utaluwedde kakati mwabadde ku task force muddeyo gye mwava kuno muddeyo gye mwava
elections
anti nkubuulira nti very big point. You have a democracy which should need politicians but you don't have politicians.
So do we have democracy?
A politician is who gets his money survival by doing political work. Politics comes from a Greek word, politicking. You must be active all the time.
What made it dirty? Politics is a dirty game.
Politics is a dirty game depending on the dirtiness of a particular country. Bibakola buli omu abikola because we have scientific elections and crude rigging, scientific rigging and crude rigging. Kakati where you don't have ti abaana tebaasomye mukazi wo tewamututte ku antenatal clinic, what comes next? Onenya basomesa?
Apana.
Ogenda kunonya wetunonyeza abasomesa ng'abaana bonna baagudde. Wetunonyeza abasawo nti eddwaliro tuliddemu tukuba abasawo ng'abakazi bafuddewo 10 abazaala. If the doctors can explain ti ono yalwayo, they blame you, you take the blame yourself.
True.
Kakati ekyokubiri tiba politicians bawano tebatunuulira kati tubalina tebatunuulira it is a process. Kakati electoral commission teyina defense. But look, bannayuganda babasomesa nga bolaba omwana atasoma bitabo n'amanya nti bajja kumubbira tabathering.
That it doesn't put in anything.
No. Kakati bo bano bajja ne baliducinga buli kintu to money. They don't bother. Nja kukwata ssente ngula obululu.
Politics nafuuka owakabaasa.
Kati tebasoma.
Tebaddayo ku ground.
Tebaddayo tebakola ki?
Olowooza kuno tebikyuse.
Every war produces its general.
Labayo muzeeyi Tamale kuno olowooza tebikyuse. Waliwo generation gyemanyi nti eri desperate for change. Ku luno babakubyemu torch.
For the last 7 years I've been engaged in war. Nabano ba mafia abajooza abavubuka abajooga abantu. Baali tebanemeddwawo.
6 years ng'oli mu lutalo.
Yes, because I'm an activist. Kakati bo bano opportunist abalowoleza mu ssente ye mwana alowoleza mu kumubbira ebigezo tasoma. Nti look, how do we plan elections? Elections in 1980 Obote yabawangula nga n'akalulu tekannaba. Why? Etteeka ly'ebyokulonda lyakolebwanga Muwanga yaaliwo. Muwanga n'alonda akakiiko k'ebyokulonda naye nga tekali vetted by anybody. Tekaali. Ne bateekamu etteeka mu election gundi ti Interparty Committee. Interparty Committee, it had no binding resolutions. it was just kutuula butuuzi mwogere. None of the resolutions in 1980 that came from the interparty committee tebyakolebwako. Muwanga goes ahead n'ateekawo kye tuyita gerrymandering, Apache North, Apache East, Apache West, Apache North, ewaabwe gye banaafuna obululu. 17 UPC MPs went through unopposed. Twalina constituency 26 nga Bugatta Busoga ne Buganda, where DP expected to get votes zalinga constituency 56. Era Semwogere yeti yalowoozaako n'olunaku n'olumu nti basobola omuwangula, so nga statistically bali abasajja baali bamaze okubala 17 MPs nti yatugamba mu 1980 okuvali ku Constitutional Square n'atugamba nti Dr. Byamugisha lawyer waffe tumaze omulagira agire banalifyinge akalulu. The whole of West Nile region kuba baali baseeyo abantu abakikosi maalum Gondi the Ombachi massacre tewaliyo kulonda. UPC nominated the people. There was no voting in West Nile. Two, Gondi etteeka ly'okulonda teryali kiriya, tewaliwo presidential, but did not stand as a president. Two, tetwali mu parliamentary. When you analyze the statistics of that election 1980, ojja kukisanga nga DP got more votes than UPC. How could Obote come to power? Tetwali mu parliamentary, Obote never wanted to hear the word prime minister. Kyali kimuzaayo. Kakati ebyo byokka byali bimaze okuba DP ekigo. Even going to elections, ebyo byokka byali bimaze okukola ki?
Ogikuba. But
they continued saying, Semwogere last rally mu 1980 yagikuba kubayita ababiri. N'atuga tusinkane mu State House enkya.
Ngamanya isemu.
Alinanye airport yajja kulinnya ennyonyi mangu. All of these ones, Muwanga sacked 17 DCs who were supposed to be returning officers on the eve of elections. Ebyo byali bimala. Nti akalubu UPC yali ekoze eki era Muwanga mutunuli ono musajja wa electoral commission yabaka
Justice Samuel yabaka
Paulo Muwanga. Ti Paulo Muwanga ye yadentinga okulonda ku Obote. Nti olwokuba a group had magid at the DP headquarters nabaga nti mu morning nalaba Dr. Semwogerere ne Masiya Singobi bambadde amasuuti malungi accompanied by the British High Commission to Uganda going to Muwanga to get votes. Naye nga mu Kampala Central temwali kulonda.
You have always said Justice Byabakama is denting President Museveni's vote.
Bamukwatirawo. DP used to announce victories tewaliwo mobile phones. Kakati bali wangudde batya.
Buli kyogera lwatu bulinaku nti.
Let us look at this election. Election, Mbabazi yagenda mu court. Mbabazi is a smart guy. Yafuna obulu butono nnyo. Naye Mbabazi kye yakola yagenda mu court n'ateekako brave face. The court ruled and gave you, if I had come with my book, 10 commandments. Baba 10 recommendations. Why 10? The 10 commandments. Ne baba gamba 2 years before the election, this election, implemented them. Ne bateka over minister bonna aba justice, including my friend Otafiri. Bazikolako. And the opposition was watching. Court directed, in fact, the judges were polite. What they said, unless you implement these 10 recommendations, elections in the future will not be fair.
Free and fair.
Yes. Meaning, nti akalulu kano kemuvuddemu Mbabazi yatta akalulu ka Museveni.
Aka 2016.
Abalamuzi baali baga nti kano kabadde kafu. Naye tetusobola kajjawo. Naye mu future, muteekewo bino bibiri.
What are some of those things?
Okitegeera nti boss Bobi Wine was in parliament. Ab'opposition bonna baagala okwesimba kati I hear them talking noise, talking nonsense. Kansala bamuwa batya ennaku entono simanyi ng'atawuli ayina ekitundu kinene. Where were you? Where were you when these laws were being debated?
But I think it's an abnormal campaign, abnormal election.
When do you complain? May I complain straight away? This is unfair. Because if you had active politicians, they would be monitoring this like the weather forecast. Men,
I think to a certain point they were right because bw'otuna nominations ezaaliwo presidential candidates be basembayo okubya nominated bano local government members of parliament baba nominatinga before naye ate bw'olaba nti campaigns they were given about 65 days
neogamba ne bakugamba nti creating constituencies. Who creates constituencies in Uganda?
It's the parliament.
The Electoral Commission creates constituencies.
Not the parliament?
Depending on a certain ratio that 50,000 people must be represented.
So, is it Electoral Commission or Parliament?
Yes, Electoral Commission. Neiche baje kolera bana magezi. Bategeka okulonda nominations nachi after the census. Ati kakati Electoral Commission egenda okujja nga census ekoze eki. They would work together. The census would correspond.
How come you go in national population census?
You can't look for it. Kakati as a result, who created these constituencies? Nankabirwa nga atudde ne kokasi y'enaalemu. All of the constituencies, the gerrymandering constituencies, were they created by Electoral Commission?
The 46 of them.
Ze baateekawo. Abalamuzi ne bagaa nti okulonda kwazo kuyita kulinda general election ate ne be-contradicting. Who created the constituencies?
Wamma tebafuna babaka ba parliament.
N'abaali bagenda okwesimba mu constituencies because they are carving out constituencies, but you have an interest to stand in your constituency. You are not an immigrant that you will go there. It takes me at least 3 years to determine whether you will stand. Kwaba opposition yani ayogera nti who has powers nankabiro yatuula ne banne olanya n'alaaja na constituency ye bagitememu ne bagaana. Do you know nti constituency za Uganda waliwo ayina eggombolola ebbiri
nebeera constituency
oli agenda n'alwana ne bamukutulirako.
Bw'otunula ebizibu byonna bigenda maaso mu ggwanga, at one point I'm forced to think nti
mwesiga kukoppa
ng'ovudde ne kwekyo Mzee Tamale tulina constitution erimu amadirisa etali mu madirisa etali mu nzigi etali mu bumooli.
When do you determine nti nja kwesimbawo? Okwera bukezi n'Obama. Is politics for gambling? Is it for gamblers? Politics is not for gamblers.
Anti byayinoone kati afuuka politics obwakabaasa.
Kakati you're telling me government batugamba political power is influence and advantage. The government has advantage and influence. It can order. The opposition can propose. But you look what the opposition. Bobi Wine was in parliament. You can sympathize with these people who are not in parliament. Did he raise any of those issues? Bano Bobi Wine yalina violence, bano balina ssente.
Katulabani anayitawo.
Ati kakati kyenkubuulira, kakati nze elections wezibalira. Even at this time of finishing, I can evaluate. One, kyemuyina wano kakati ebibatta biri ebyo naye ate nga byonna mukuba bbali. One, mitigating against violence. Mitigating against violence. When you look at the history of Uganda, you will find that's why I criticize these professors of psychology. This is what motivated me to take my 2 children to do psychology. Because our educated people, the professors, don't come to guide the society. A professor of psychology, yalibadde yatunulira dda history ya Uganda n'atubuulira when do you have a violent election, what creates violence in the Uganda society.
Anti kati Martin Luther King Jr. abyogerako n'agamba the world is suffering not because of the violent people but because of the silent of a few people.
Why did we have violence in 62 at the independence? The British would not accept a DP man to take a power. They made sure that elections were rigged in favor of Milton Obote. Era bw'otulya violence ya 1962 Kabaka yekka, a party that was supposed to be led by the Kabaka, committed a lot of atrocities against the Democratic Party. Why? They could only win, force the DPs into submission by violence. I have a summary which was made by Parliament in 1966, summarizing the violence Kabaka Yekka was meting out to UPC and the DP, because UPC had gone out of the alliance by 1964. Bamuwanga ne bakuliyetinga arrangement yali egamba nti under the alliance Buganda would be a preserve of Kabaka Yekka. Then the people like Pamuru Muwanga, the Baganda said, if we leave Buganda to Kabaka Yekka, are we going to remain nominated members in order to come to Parliament? They opposed the Obote. The Baganda UPC Buganda to Jitadeu to compete with the men. Gendo Rabe Samari. Why? The violence was state-inspired violence. The Kabaka Yekka people killed the people because they knew they were protected.
But you're telling
psychologist in Uganda, they will have 3 times when we have violence. 1, state-inspired violence.
When you history about our elections in Uganda, literally, Tamale.
Why is it that
UPC, literally, elections are supposed to mean okuba akalulu, okujaganya, okulonda omuntu ogwoyagala, but this time around, botunya history nga bomwogedde, kiri nti akalulu, elections have turned out to be a vigil,
these are 2 issues.
maziga na biwobe. Why?
These are 2 issues. Bw'obanga oli coach n'oyagala omutabani wo ali mu ttiimu y'abaatemba temugoba. Elections must be between a winning winner and a willing loser. You congratulate yourselves.
But does it happen? Why is it not happening in Uganda?
Side is that the British don't want Ben Chiwanuka, the Democratic Party. Baleeta wano n'omusajja nga bamuyita Pierre Bulamu nga mubbi wa bululu. Purpose to lead elections. The British ne bagamba Ben Chiwanuka nti gwe gavumenti yo tejja kutegeka kulonda. Commonwealth rules don't. Where? Ne baddira ab'emmengo ne babagamba mutegeka okulonda. The chairman of Buganda Electoral Commission in 1961 was Abu Mayanja, a minister in the Mengo government.
Had the British China influence even up to date?
Returning officers, Baribami Bakabaka. One of the factions. You have denied the Bend to organize elections, but you are allowing Mengo to organize elections because you want Buganda, Baganda, Munkaga Mukutevalunda.
Abangereza China influence Mukaro Kabili
MPs. The British urged that since the Buganda District was going to be elected by universal suffrage, the 21 MPs in Buganda should be elected by the Electoral College. Do it now.
80 days to voting.
Anti nkubuulira
abazungu bachina influence
ekibi kyokola mupapa nnyo. You want to finish, even if we talk about violence, it helps the people. Nkugambye, look at 2 elements. It shifts from a fair election, it shifts from who wins takes power to a factor, an interest of a certain powerful group. Ukulonda ni kufa. Au ukulonda kuafa. Toga nti abalonzi bebali abasiru. In fact, the law, ngabwe nzembagamba, do you know that in 1962, to go to court to challenge elections, you had to deposit 40 shillings.
Ngazachi.
Ogenda okuwaba mu kkooti nti bakubbye obululu mu nkaaga. Etteeka lyali ligamba omala kuteekayo ennusuwana ng'ani azirina, because the British pound at that time yali ya siringi 2 era akesiringi 2 twakayitanga aka pound. Kakati election tezafa bannayuganda baali tebasobola kulonda. Given freedom, Ugandans would vote. Given circumstances, abangereza balina interests zaabwe. Kati ne tujja mu kinaana, what happened? The issue was, should Obote come back or not? DP was seen as a shield against Obote's return. Tewaliwo issue ndala. Era Kayiira yagamba, omugenzi Kayiira yali Namasuba, addressing a rally naga nti if we want Obote to be charged for abolishing the kingdoms and demolishing the Rubiri, vote Semogere. Kaira was hunted down by people. He had to free. Obote took charge. Nabaga nti Obote yajja n'emmotoka ze nga ziriko number plate. Uganda wants Obote. UWO. Obote took
Uganda
over.
wants Obote.
Yes.
Wow.
He took over immediately. Why the battle was reduced between a wound. Obote akomawo obata akomawo. The British wanted Obote. Why? Obote in 1980, in spite of what they had done, bakola ebintu bibiri. The Commonwealth Secretariat sent a man called George Kanyehamba to meet DP leaders in Nairobi to talk about the possibility of extending elections. But Semogere looked at it as a burden. UPM was demanding election. Bakubanika katuni muwikire topic. Nga Semogere ali ku set Obote yayise mu kkubo ddala naye Semogere ebicupa byonna biri mu luguudo. Semogere could not extend the elections. Why? It was a burden to him. Bali batta aba DP. Akalukali kawedde. Kakati bwe tujja mu 80 ne kabeera reduced ku ekyo. Obululu buno bwonna obubaddewo. One of Museveni's achievements is that he was haunted by the past. Museveni nga tabba bululu. For the first time, in 1980, the whole of Gonde, Honorable Second Java, Bajita Bukoto. Bukoto had one MOP. Send away. One MOP in 1980, up to 1989. Never ballot a clear formula, a year 50,000 to be represented in the parliament, clearly, cutting across the whole country. Bukoto Chikirwa Babaka. Batan. 5.
Secondary Bukoto Central.
5. This cut across. Why? NRM wanted democracy at that time. It wanted democracy.
Tamale, you're one of the people who have been in the Ugandan making. Njagalombole, your honest truth. Is Uganda democratic?
Yes.
Like it assumes?
But you see, even democracy, why? The problem is either we win or they lose. Whereas Bafani Bamungereza, Bakole Fujo, or Bakole Fujo, Britain, Yakubido, Twin Express one. Whatever Congo Express, Bama in Yakaleferita GB. Era nze mbadde mbagamba bulijjo nti Miracle ya Museveni eri eki. As Besigye complains that has been rigged out, the Ngandas who have won parliamentary seats go to parliament. Tumuwa dialogue with the whole of villages. Abantu ba celebrating. And let me tell you, Ugandans don't mind about the presidency.
I need to ask you this personal question.
Ugandans in a monarchical society where people are used to kings, the question of longevity of a leader doesn't work as long as he delivers. Era abantu bakugamba fenna tunaba president naye bw'otandika okubba obululu bwa MPs, this is where the fire is going to come. See what president.
Where's the difference?
I listen to them.
At
times in watching. Yesterday I rang somebody. Nemugamba, you have received 33 million shillings on your phone. True or not? Yes. From where? Nemubulira. Nemugamba nti sente ezo bazikuwadde mugule amasimu amapya mukyuse amasimu amakadde mubbe obululu nti kubamba monitoring. Don't waste your time to buy new. Sigwe osinga abantu bonna benkubi. Mise ina technology w'amaanyi. Muga tugula amasimu sente ziriye. Sente lyandi. Go and make sure that you convince the voters, but don't resort to cheating. The cheaters are not Museveni. In fact, the cheaters are going to spoil Museveni's room. Why? Baagala okuleeta abawagizi baabwe mu parliament, to dominate the parliament by all costs.
In whose interest are the members of parliament, not the president?
Anti kakati kankubuulire, election yeno naye eringa ya 62, eringa ya 80. Why? Nti balowooza this is the last lap of Museveni. Kakati mulimu group ey'abaana bavubuka abajoozi be nakubajjo nga bategeka escape routes. Tulina okubeera ekisugu, tulina bajja kubakwatira temujja kudduka. The best you should do, don't mess up with elections. Are
we really going to have a free and fair election?
Kakati make sure ti omubaka wa parliament kansala gwe bawangudde bamuwangula
akkirize
but
it doesn't happen tekibangawo wano mu Africa not even in Uganda
naye bwemba mulowooza let me tell you ndaba bukedde Museveni aleese omukambwe mu Kampala let me tell you there is no professional army that can turn against its citizens.
Aho tugenda tukamuzeyi nika nkuze wali katono nnyo nga tututa kumboza endala katono nnyo muzeyi Tamale olwaki omanyi lwaki nkubuuza whether Uganda is democratic tuliziganye muzeyi Tamale omanyi lwaki nkubuuza wa Uganda is democratic. I have a belief in democracy gwe tuyina akyali ku lupapula if we call ourselves independent katono nnyo
mwemugamba temuyina
tuliziganye
nze njirina media
tuliziganye
because I'm empowered
tuliziganye
ajjuke muyo omuleze bamubema mwasa omutwe yajjangako emu ajijjeko kati bamubere mu hoteli babuwoje
tuliziganye
akawala kali mu UCC kajjeko emu
bwe tugamba nti Uganda yafuna independence mu 1962
you see
ne batugamba abazungu nti if you want to attain democracy you need to have periodic elections.
Trump abadde kuvaako
katono nnyo tuliziganye muzeyi Tamale
given a chance Trump abadde kuvaako
tuliziganye katono nnyo amawanga gonna aga Africa agafugibwako ensi ez'enjawulo bwe baba obwetwaze buli nsi ya defining a democracy in their own setting
kubanga oli mwana muto neka nkubuulire
anti
Ghana bali mmere the Ghanaians have decided that our country must move the Ghanaians have decided maybe what I
because
can see
they defined their own setting. They woke up and defined their own setting.
Ghanaians and their leaders have accepted that the country must move.
It started way back for ya Kwame Nkrumah. Now setting Ghana how they want to govern themselves. Never with independence. We never took time to define how we should govern ourselves.
All of the constitutions of Uganda have excellent bills of rights. A Ugandan cannot be in a prison beyond these hours. Have you ever seen a constitution going visiting the prisons to release these people? A constitution remains a document unless the activists who can enforce it. A constitution is a marriage ring. Tewaliwo muwala wa bukedde yayendera mu lodge nga n'empeta agirina empeta yakuba enduulu. So democracy depends on the leaders. We have decided our country must develop. Whoever mujjemu ne anger. If I win, if this man wins, I have to go into exile. If this wins, I will not stay here. Museveni does not pursue his enemies. But when we live here comfortably, elections are here. Museveni Museveni does not believe in the political assassinations.